Oh, politically correct Ben Affleck. It turns out, after a bit of digging through his ancestry, he discovered that he had slaveholders in his family. Now, this wouldn't have been the controversy it was if he hadn't tried to cover it up on a PBS piece, I believe it was. So, this is an article from Breitbart.com entitled Ben Affleck has another 9 slaveholder ancestors from throughout the South. Hollywood movie star Ben Affleck has another 9 slaveholder ancestors from Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia, according to publicly available U.S. Census records and genealogy research conducted by Breitbart News. Last week, Affleck admitted that he successfully pressured Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates to edit his Georgia slaveholding ancestor, Benjamin Cole, out of an episode of the PBS series Finding Your Roots that featured his family history. James Henry Alexander, Affleck's 4 times great-grandfather, owned 50 slaves in Holly Springs, Marshall County, Mississippi, at the outbreak of the Civil War, according to the 1860 U.S. Census slave schedules. So my question is, why exactly did he go digging up his past if all he found was dirt? And better yet, why would he feature himself in an episode of PBS series Finding Your Roots if he knew he had such a sordid history? His family has such a sordid history. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering his political standpoint on the whole thing. I mean, I imagine he's just burdened with white guilt, as we could see on at least I saw the piece on Bill Maher, where he and the panel are discussing the situation in the Middle East, and he thinks that addressing, the whole Islamophobia thing, basically where you cannot address Muslims without being considered a racist, because most of them are from Middle Eastern countries. So it goes into a lot of genealogy here. Basically, it would be quite tiring to read it all. And they list additionally unknown slave ancestors of Ben Affleck. So the relative ease with which Breitbart News is able to find these 9 additional slaveholding ancestors of Ben Affleck calls into question the integrity of the genealogy research undertaken on Affleck's behalf by Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates, executive producer of the Finding Your Roots series. According to an article published at another Gates-related venture, The Root, Gates is also a part owner of the series through a company he controls, Inkwell. Gates certainly missed several dramatic reveals, including the fact that when Affleck's mother, Christopher Ann Bolt, traveled to Mississippi in 1965 to support African American civil rights, not in 1964 as a freedom rider as Gates inaccurately claimed in the episode, dozens of her second and third cousins were living in Mississippi, some quite possibly members of the Democratic political power structure that supported segregation at the time. Going forward, it looks like a no-win proposition for Gates. Either he failed to conduct basic genealogy research to discover these additional slave-holding ancestors, or he found them and chose to conceal them from the public, maybe even from Affleck as well. Both Affleck and Gates have acknowledged, however, that he did disclose to Affleck that Benjamin Cole, his great-great-great-grandfather, owned 25 slaves in Georgia, according to the 1850 U.S. Census slaveholding schedules. Through the PBS internal review of the Gates-Affleck controversy is still in process, it is hard to see how, with these new revelations, the network can keep the series if Gates continues to be host and executive producer. Unless, of course, Gates changes the name of the series from Finding Your Roots to Hiding Your Roots. And in other news, we have the mayor of Baltimore City, who is cited wishing to give space to rioters who want to destroy property and maybe even attack people. It is another Breitbart piece, so it comes with all the implications that Breitbart pieces do. But during a Saturday briefing, Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake said her city government, quote, gave those who wish to destroy the space to do that, seemingly approving of the rioters who smashed the city's police vehicles in the wake of the death of Freddie Gray. Gray, a man with a drug rap sheet, arrested on a weapons conviction. It should be noted the weapons conviction was a switchblade, suffered a spinal cord injury, perhaps due to rough handling by police, and died on April 19th. Reports are inconclusive, however, and the police are not talking. Rawlings Blake said, Rawlings Blake being the mayor. No, wait. Rawlings Blake? Yeah, that's the mayor, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I've made it very clear that I work with the police and instructed them to do everything they could to make sure the protesters could exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act because while we tried to make sure they were protected from the cars and other things that were going on, we gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. And we worked very hard to keep that balance and to put ourselves in the best position to de-escalate. And that's what you saw. Yeah, because, letting mobs run rampant and destroy property isn't setting a dangerous precedent of any sort for the future now, is it? I mean, after what we saw in Ferguson, we might conclude that basically the lack of law enforcement during the protests, some of which, I mean, if we remember, there was a cop shot from a building. Two cops shot from a building across the street, and they were lucky to be alive yet. But apparently the militant protesters who are protesting for justice, mob justice obviously, will continue to do so as long as we give them the ability, we give them that platform. And after this article was written, there was an attack on about 7 police, I believe, one of which is hospitalized or at least severely injured. So as you can see, these people will not stop. It is sort of like the Rotherham rape gangs, where the politicians in charge are so afraid of being considered racist that they will allow this uncivility, this rioting and destruction of private property to take place with little to no action taken against it. Nothing to put themselves in the best position to de-escalate. What does that mean? It means pandering to a crazy mob? That's not what free speech is. Free speech ends when you actually violate somebody else's property or their person. You can't just go around destroying people's property and saying, free speech, bitch, and get away with it. That's a crime. These people should be going to jail. And if it requires bringing in the National Guard, I'm total support of that. Because we need to send a message to these uncouth, uncivilized nutjobs that this is not how we protest in a civilized society. We do not destroy things when we don't like how our government is working. Okay? And this needs to stop. We need to get over our phobia of being considered or being labeled racist. And the ironic thing is the mayor is actually, I believe, a black woman, or at least a person of color. So it's not like in Ferguson where the mayor was white, and so, his hands were tied. You can't, this is a white guy. Ooh, don't say anything. So, I mean, if people are worried, if the black community is wondering why the majority of Americans might see them as sort of animalistic in nature, and there are plenty of radical left white people here as well, but it's stuff like this that gives people the impression that black people, even though it is not substantiated really in any significant way, but that because these are the stories that receive the lion's share of news coverage, and it presents this picture, this very negative picture of a race that is just completely violent, batshit crazy, and out of control. And yes, there are white people there as well, and that gives a bad impression of all liberal-leaning people. So we need to stop these people from pulling this shit. If people are breaking the laws, they need to stand. They need their day in court. They need to answer for it, though. We don't just let them go anymore, like we did in Ferguson. If people are destroying private property and they are attacking other people, we need the law enforcement there. I know, people hate the law enforcement, and it's crazy. But you know what? Maybe if you didn't break the law, maybe if you didn't resist the police when they came to arrest you, maybe you just might be alive yet. Now, this comes from a person. I grew up in a family that does not and did not trust the police. There was an altercation with them. It was over a missing person report, and it was rather personal, so I'm not going to get into it. But basically, the police, they come over and they immediately view the one reporting the incident as a prime suspect in the case, and they were very over edgy and typical of just what you would expect a paranoid police officer to be. So it's basically the case where I was taught you don't trust the police, but at the same time, if the police stops you for a crime that they think you may have committed, they suspect you of committing, be as civil as possible with them. Do not escalate things by being a complete asshat and flipping them off or saying, you fuck the po-po, fuck the pigs, just act like a civil human being who's living in a civil society. Okay? I mean, you feel the need to show how against the system you are. I don't get it. You'll have your day in court. Just keep your mouth shut. That's the number one thing. If they tell you you have the right to remain silent, even your the Mandarin rights, not Mandarin rights. There isn't a word for it. Keep silent until you talk to a lawyer. Just go along with it. And guess what? The odds are astronomically better that you won't get killed, that you won't get shot in the back, that you won't have your spine broken, that you won't get choked to death. Now, that does not excuse any of the actions by some of these police officers at all. They're completely in the wrong for taking their enforcement to the extreme, where they are shooting people in the back who are just running away. That is not acceptable. But at the same time, you can do things to mitigate the risks of you being shot or being killed by police. It is the old mentality of the social justice victim blaming. Right? You say, oh, no, don't blame that man over there. He only committed a crime. Come on. He was just an innocent kid, right? Fuck no. This guy, for example, in Ferguson, he held up a store. That's a fucking crime. He wasn't innocent. People compare him to the modern Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. And what does that say about the civil rights movement from the 60s, where we had people of integrity, of honor, protesting? Martin Luther King himself had a famous quote, and I wish I could find it, about where violence was not the answer to changing society. And yet we have batshit crazy race riot agitators out there, like Sharpton and Jackson, who jet set out to every possible event and just stir that cauldron of race baiting. It's just, and even Obama, come on, the guy, he was supposed to bring us together, wasn't he? And what is he doing? He goes out there and says, my son could have been shot because he would have been black if I had a son. I mean, he's just inciting it. He has an opportunity. He has a duty as President of the United States not to just fly off like a syndicated talk show host or whatever, what have you. He has a greater responsibility. And he falls for the same mentality. It is so disappointing when this is considered exercise of free speech. And in conclusion to this article, the rioters destroyed cop cars in a frenzy while the police hung back. They attacked a wheelchair-bound woman and a man wearing a hashtag Black Lives Matter shirt tried to stab a terrified bystander. If I recall correctly, this was somebody exiting a stadium. But I mean, that just goes to show. Black Lives Matter, obviously an individual who didn't care about anybody else's life. And we don't know what the racist individual was, and it really doesn't matter. It points out the hypocrisy of these jackasses, these losers. Thank you for listening, and until next time, farewell.